Hey everyone, my name's Ashish, and welcome back to Crimson Files US, Black Magic and Drugs, two of the most dangerous forces known to humankind. When they come together, they can turn a person into something far worse than a monster, because black magic gives them the illusion of power, the belief that they can control anyone, and drugs take away what's left of their conscience. Today's story isn't about one serial killer, it's about a couple, a man and a woman, who believed in black magic and unleashed a wave of terror across America. Their crimes were brutal, their methods horrifying, and the pain they caused, unforgettable. This is the true story of Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown, a pair whose name still echoes in the dark corners of criminal history. Our story begins with Alton Coleman, born on November 6, 1955, in a small town near Chicago, Illinois. From the very start, life didn't treat Alton kindly. He grew up in poverty, constantly bullied at school. The other kids mocked him, called him names, pushed him around. Slowly he began to withdraw, spending more time alone, avoiding people altogether. But the reason behind his isolation wasn't just bullying. Deep down, Alton always felt different. His family even said there was something off about him, something they couldn't explain. No one knew then that this quiet, withdrawn boy would one day terrify the entire nation. By the time Alton reached his teenage years, he was already on the radar of local police. He had a reputation for being violent, unpredictable. Complaints kept piling up, breaking windows, fighting with neighbors, assaulting people for no reason. He was arrested multiple times, but each time, he somehow managed to get away with it. See, Alton wasn't just violent. He was clever, manipulative. He knew how to lie, how to twist stories, how to make people doubt the truth. Police officers later said he could charm his way out of anything. He'd dress neatly, talk politely, act like an innocent man, and walk right out of court. But behind that mask of innocence, Alton was making a decision that would shape his destiny, to make crime his career. He also started threatening and intimidating witnesses who dared to testify against him, and that's when rumors began to spread. Some of his victims even claimed that he used spells to curse them. Strangely, Alton himself never denied it. He believed in black magic and said it gave him power over people's minds. By 1983, Alton had fallen deep into drugs. His mind was spiraling out of control. Consumed by addiction and dark rituals, his family, friends, and neighbors began to fear him. One day, in a fit of rage, he brutally assaulted his own 8-year-old niece. His sister reported him to the police. But just 3 weeks later, the case was mysteriously withdrawn. She told officers it was all a misunderstanding, but the judge knew the truth. She was terrified of Alton. This was the 5th time he'd escaped justice in an assault case, and once again, he walked free. Not long after, his name surfaced in connection with the murder of a young girl in Chicago. Realizing that murder could mean a death sentence in Illinois, Alton fled, and that's where the true nightmare began. Around this time, Alton met a woman named Deborah Brown. Before meeting him, Deborah wasn't a criminal. She had no record, no violent past. In fact, she was engaged to another man, until Alton convinced her to break it off. Deborah fell madly in love with him, and Alton used that love to control her completely. He beat her often, humiliated her, and manipulated her into believing they were destined to be together, bound by black magic and fate. Deborah came from a deeply troubled background. She was one of 11 siblings. Her father was an alcoholic, her mother a heroin addict. One night, her father punched her in the head so hard that it caused lasting brain injuries. Doctors said she would always be a little slow compared to others. That vulnerability made her the perfect puppet for someone like Alton. In May 1984, police finally got a lead on Alton. They found Deborah and began questioning her, hoping she'd reveal his location. The interrogation started on June 1st, 1984, but Deborah refused to say a word. On June 5th, she vanished, running away with Alton. The two of them went underground, traveling to Indiana under fake identities and renting an apartment with forged documents. For 2 weeks, they stayed hidden. Then, on June 18th, 2 sisters, ages 7 and 9, disappeared while shopping at a convenience store. Hours later, the older sister was found alive, but severely injured. The younger one was missing. The next morning, her body was discovered in nearby bushes. She'd been stabbed multiple times, brutally murdered. When the older sister regained consciousness, she told police something horrifying. She said a man and a woman had kidnapped them at knife point. The man sat on her little sister's chest and stabbed her repeatedly in the heart while the woman held her down and forced her to watch. Then they beat the older girl and left her barely alive. That girl was traumatized for life. Her parents, devastated by the tragedy, moved out of the country just to escape the memories. And that was only the beginning. Just hours after that murder, 25-year-old Donna Williams vanished. Her parents filed a missing person report. Days later, her body was found in an abandoned house. By now, Alton and Deborah had already moved on to Detroit. The police launched a multi-state manhunt, but the couple was always one step ahead. They'd charm people into helping them, then rob, assault, or murder those very same people. They kept stealing cars, switching license plates, leaving vehicles abandoned across states to confuse investigators. Then, they struck again, this time in Cincinnati, Ohio. Their victim, a woman named Marilyn Walters. They killed her in her own basement. Her husband was found brutally beaten, but alive. Once again, they'd left a witness behind, a cruel trademark of their crimes. Soon after, Marilyn's stolen car was found abandoned near Lexington, Kentucky. Another diversion tactic to mislead the police. The pair then traveled to Williamsburg, continuing their violent spree. By now, the entire Midwest was living in fear. News channels were calling them America's killer couple. Then came July 16th, 1984, the night that would finally lead to their downfall. That evening, Olin Carmichael, a political science professor, was returning to his hotel after finishing a lecture. He parked his car, turned off the engine, and before he could step out, two guns were pointed at him. Alton and Deborah. They demanded his wallet, car keys, everything. Olin complied, hoping they'd let him go, but instead they forced him into the car's trunk. They drove for miles before stopping in a desolate area near Lexington. There, Alton told Olin they needed more money. The terrified professor offered to call his wife, saying she could bring the cash. They agreed and took him to a phone booth. Alton made Olin tell his wife he'd lost money gambling and needed her help immediately. He said he'd call again to give her directions, but instead, they left Olin locked in the trunk of his car, abandoned on a highway. He couldn't understand why they'd just leave him there. Later, police realized it was another deliberate misdirection. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, two more victims were discovered. 75-year-old Eugene Scott and his wife. Eugene had been killed, his car stolen. That same car was later used by Alton and Deborah as they traveled back toward Ohio, a fatal mistake. Because by then, their faces were everywhere. On posters, TV, newspapers, America's Most Wanted. A few days later, the couple stopped at a park where a local basketball game was going on. They sat on a bench, watching, but someone in the crowd recognized them from the news and quietly slipped away to call the police. Within half an hour, the park was surrounded. When officers approached, Alton didn't panic. He didn't even flinch. He calmly said, "You've got the wrong man." There was no fear in his eyes, only exhaustion. Deborah, on the other hand, was silent, expressionless. At the station, they were questioned separately. Deborah gave a fake name, Denise Johnson, but the gun and knife found with them told the truth. The next morning, their arrest made front-page headlines. The entire Midwest finally breathed a sigh of relief. Officers at the scene said something strange. They believed Alton wanted to be caught, that stopping for a basketball game was his way of surrendering without saying it. Because no one had ever been better at evading the police than him until that day. At first, both refused to talk, but after a few days, Deborah broke. Her interrogation lasted over 2 hours, and what she revealed shocked everyone. She described in chilling detail how she and Alton picked their victims, tortured them, killed them, and then used their belongings to travel to the next state. She also confessed that Alton believed these killings were sacrifices for black magic rituals, offerings to gain ultimate power. The police had never heard anything like it. Even after her confession, her crimes were far too severe to grant leniency. She was sentenced to death, no appeal allowed. Alton was given the same sentence, death by lethal injection, in Ohio. He tried to appeal to the Supreme Court, claiming his rights were violated, but his appeal was denied. On April 26, 2002, the day of his execution, Alton Coleman ordered an enormous final meal. Fried chicken, biscuits, cornbread, French fries, salad, cheese, ice cream, and cherry Coke. The execution chamber had a small observation room where only 12 people could watch. Among them were the families of victims, people who had waited nearly 2 decades for justice. At 10 a.m., Alton was brought into the chamber wearing a prayer shawl. He was strapped onto the table, and intravenous lines were attached to his arms. Through the glass, he tried to say something to his lawyers, but no one could hear him. he remained calm, eerily calm. As the first chemical flowed into his veins, it was a 3-drug cocktail. The first to make him unconscious, the second to stop his breathing, the third to stop his heart. As the injection began, Alton started reciting Psalm 23 from the Bible. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." His voice faded as the sedative took effect. Within minutes, he was motionless. At 10:30 a.m., Alton Coleman was pronounced dead. In the observation room, the families of his victims wept uncontrollably. The mother and grandmother of that 7-year-old girl, the one forced to watch her sister die, broke down completely. For them, justice had finally arrived. But closure? That would never come. Their lives were shattered forever, because no punishment, no death sentence, could ever bring back what they lost. This case remains one of the darkest in American criminal history, not just for its brutality, but for what it reveals about the human mind. It shows how blind faith and addiction can twist a person so far that they forget what it means to be human. Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown believed in black magic. They believed they had power over life and death, but in the end, their darkness consumed only themselves. If this story shook you, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more true crime stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.